Hello, here's another landscape. It's a charcoal drawing of a lake, and I know that some of you are probably thinking that I already had a drawing just like this with a fallen tree in the foreground. Well, this one is a little bit different. I have the tree on the other side, and I have more stuff in the foreground, and the trees are a little bit different, and the mountains and the sky. So just trust me, it's a different landscape. Just sit back and I'm going to show you the drawing process. Enjoy. I'm going to do my sketch with a graphite pencil. The paper is about 9 times 12 inches in size. First, I'm going to put down some lines where I think the trees and where I think the shoreline will be. So the trees are going to be around here, and I'm going to have a few mountains in the background. Some of them will be a little bit more defined than others. And this is going to be that log or fallen tree. And I'm going to have some reflections and stuff like that. But first, I'm going to start with these mountains. What I'm using right now is vine charcoal, and I'm pressing very lightly, and I'm just gonna draw some shapes of mountains in the background. So that's the middle one. I'm spreading this vine charcoal with a brush, and I'm also using the charcoal off the brush to add a little bit of value to the sky, but I'm just gonna create a few hints of clouds, nothing special here. Now I'm adding some more detail to the mountain using my Tortillion. I don't really want to do any work with a pencil there because I want to avoid contrast and texture, so I want these to be a little bit blurry and less defined because they're in the back. And I'm going to have another mountain here in the back, which is even less visible. So another one here. Again, I'm doing all of this with a piece of vine charcoal, and I'm blending that softly with a paper towel and then adding a few details with a Tortillion. I'm just going to add some suggestions of another mountain to the left before I start drawing those trees. And now I grabbed a woodless charcoal pencil, which is my primary tool in most of my drawings. And now I'm going to draw some coniferous trees here. And you can see that I'm drawing some branches in the upper left corner. So some of these trees are going to be closer to us, closer to the viewer than others, and the one here all the way on the left is going to be closer. That's why I'm putting more work into these branches and adding more detail, whereas the ones in the back are going to be smaller and less detailed and less defined. So I'm really trying to imitate the appearance of branches and those clusters of needles. and I'm going to be doing that all the way to these rocks which are going to be around the lake. I'm going to put some rocks around the lake, and here I'm drawing some other trees which are a little bit further away. This one is in front of them, and I'll need to use my eraser to define that a little bit better, but now I'm just creating some suggestions of these trees. And as you can see, I'm putting a little bit less work into their shape. I'm just trying to imitate the shape of coniferous trees. And here in the under those trees, I'm just going to have some bushes and some rocks. That's not going to be too defined. I don't really care too much about putting too much detail there. I'm just going to try to make some of these trees stand out against the others, so that it looks like a whole bunch of trees there. I normally just draw a vertical line and try to imitate the appearance of branches and those needles around it when I draw a coniferous tree, or a distant coniferous tree, so it's fairly simple. But I think what's going to add to the realism of all of this is the fact that I'm going to have some contrast between the trees which are getting more light and those which are further in the background. And I'm gonna draw some highlights on the tops of these trees to make them stand out a little bit more, which I think will make the scene look a little more realistic. Now I'm just scribbling here. I didn't have a clear idea about what these rocks are going to look like. I just wanted some rough terrain next to the lake, with some larger rocks and some smaller ones. So I'm now blending this a little bit with a soft brush, just to make it a little more dense, give it more volume. And now I started to define individual trees. You can see that I'm shading some of them a little bit darker so as to push them back, as it were, and I'm drawing some of them a little bit lighter and pulling some highlights on them so that they kind of stand out, like they're a little bit in front of the others. And I'm going to be doing that with all of the other trees as well, from left to right. And you can see that here I'm trying to produce a smaller, finer texture by scribbling and suggesting the appearance of some bushes and very small rocks and a few larger ones here and there around the lake. Here we're going to have a larger one, a couple of larger ones. I'm going to leave those lighter so that they stand out against the background. So I can't really be bothered with every single detail, and I don't necessarily have to put that much work into every single detail. You can just scribble a little bit and try to produce an illusion of detail and complexity, which is often very easy to accomplish when you're working in charcoal. When you work in charcoal, you'll discover that there are a lot of these happy accidents, as Bob Ross would call them. That's because of the nature of the medium. It's kind of messy and all over the place, and you have to use these. You have to use what the medium is giving you. Use it to your advantage. And now I'm drawing some more trees here in the middle and to the right. You can see how much smaller some of these are further back to the right. So I'm gonna try to make it look like there are many trees there, layers of trees, if you will, and like some of them are behind the others. So I want to create more depth in this tree line here, because and in the intro I mentioned that similar drawing that I did, I didn't feel like I had as much depth with those trees, so I want to fix that. I'm using a vine charcoal again here. I want to create some reflections in the lake, and these are going to be simplified. I'm going to try to make them as simple as possible, just trying to match roughly what's above the surface. So if there are any darker areas, I just try to match that in my reflection, just approximately. I don't need to be very precise with it, and I'm trying to create some variations of lighter and darker value. So now time to work more on these trees. As you can see, I'm mostly scribbling this, and initially it won't look like much because I need to define individual trees a little bit better. I won't try to define every single one, obviously, but I just need to define a tree here and there, and this will give us an illusion of detail. So you see, once I've covered that with charcoal, I'm going to blend that a little bit with a brush like I did with the portion on the left that I've already done. And once I go over it with a brush, it'll get a little bit darker, it will get a little bit smoother, it'll get a little more both volume and value. But after I've done that, I will start to go in and try to define some darker areas in between the trees, and then pull some highlights to define the tops of some of these trees. Some of them are going to be smaller than the others, some of them are going to be larger than the others, so I'm going to try to vary their shape and their size as much as possible. So that's what I'm doing now. As you can see, again I'm working with a woodless charcoal pencil. I'm putting in some darker areas in between, trying to sort of break this line of trees into individual trees, so that this forest, this line of trees looks not only a little bit more complex, but so that it looks a little more dense, and so that we can create more depth. This is a pencil eraser, and you can see how I'm trying to pull some highlights, focusing mostly on the tops of the trees because those are the ones that are getting the most light. I'm trying to clean up as much charcoal there to make them stand out. I am just imitating the shape and the appearance of coniferous trees. I don't have to worry about every single detail. I just have to try to make it look sort of convincing from a distance. I can put in a few of them here and there, and you can see occasionally I just create a suggestion of a treetop that's getting more light. I don't have to finish the rest of the tree. So I think it's coming along nicely here, and I've already done most of the trees, and once I finish those on the right, I'll be able to focus on the reflections in the lake, which will also require a little bit of work and patience, but we'll get there. And doing the same thing here. Just felt like I needed to make this area to the right a little bit darker. And these trees, which are sort of the furthest away from us, I'm trying to make them the smallest. But the one on the left is definitely closest to us. That's why I spent a little bit more time to work on its branches. The rest are going to be fine, more or less the way I'm drawing them now. I keep resharpening and chopping off the tip of this pencil eraser to make it clean and sharp, so that I can pull these highlights and define these tops of tops of trees, so that they stand out against the mass of trees. Just decided to go over these mountains a little bit with a brush, maybe add a little more value here and there. Even though I'm pretty happy with their shape, I'm not really going to modify much. just clean up some of the edges. So now I should probably be moving on to the reflections. And I'm going to use vine charcoal again. So here it is. Like I said, I have to try to imitate what's above the water. And I'm just putting down that vine charcoal, trying to imitate the shape of the mountain in my reflection, more or less. And you can see that I'm also varying my strokes, just even though it will be blended in later, I'm just trying to imitate the appearance of the surface of water with some ripples there. But like I said, I'm not really sure how much of it will be visible once I start blending. But if nothing else, it will create some variations in the appearance of the water. So now it's time to blend that. Vine charcoal is very easy to move around and manipulate, and depending on which blending tool you're using, you can get slightly different results, because when you use something really soft like a paper towel, you'll actually make it a lot lighter and smoother. But when you use brushes or even tortillons, you'll be able to push it into the paper and make it a little bit darker. So you have to keep that in mind when working with vine charcoal. You have to remember that the tool that you're using for blending will influence the amount of value you will create. So now I'm using my tortillon to try to create some reflections in the water. And I'm just trying to mirror some of these darker areas, or areas of darker value above the water, trying to mirror them roughly in my reflection in the lake. And as you can see here, I'm not using a paper towel or a brush. Here I'm using a tortillon to make sure that these areas will remain a little bit darker, and because I want more control over their shape. Here, as you can see, I'm using my pencil eraser to erase or clean up some of these lighter areas in my reflection to match the rocks above the surface. I'm also fixing the shape of my reflection. So I decided to make some portions of that reflection a little bit darker. And I'm kind of pulling my brush downward a little bit. And same with my tortillon as well. I am now drawing some highlights in the water using a pencil eraser. The idea is to create suggestions of some ripples in the water. I can't really imitate whatever it is that I see in my reference photo, because it's going to be a lot more complex and there's going to be a lot more of these highlights. But all I have to do is just create a few suggestions here and there. And it should be enough. I should probably have used them even more sparingly, but I think they're doing the trick, because this is starting to look like an actual reflection. These highlights stand out especially nicely against the darker areas in that reflection, but I can't have all of it as dark. As you can see, I added a few suggestions of clouds in the background, but it's very, very subtle. And now, here in the foreground on the left, I'm going to draw some bushes or a bush and a fallen tree. But I also need to clean up the upper edge of that tree. And maybe add a few broken branches here and there. It's partially in the water, and I'm going to have to draw a small reflection there as well. So here I'm using my woodless charcoal pencil to draw some rough lines to imitate the appearance of the tree bark. And working on some reflections here in the water. I'm blending that occasionally with a brush and using a combination of a regular charcoal pencil and vine charcoal, and also using my pencil eraser to draw lighter portions and also clean up some of the edges. So the texture, it's now starting to look like that of a tree. And I'm also going to put a rock there as well to make that foreground a little more interesting. I want to make it look like the lake is shallower there, So I'm also going to draw some suggestions of rocks there in the foreground, but we'll see. And now I'm working on that bush. So first I'm going to scribble a little bit to imitate the texture and appearance of leaves. Then I'm going to try to break that into segments by drawing in some of the darker areas. And then naturally I'm going to be using my pencil eraser to draw some of the highlights. Draw some of these leaves that are getting more light and which stand out. I'm going to try to make the upper edge of that bush a little bit more rough, but I'm going to do that when I start drawing highlights with a pencil eraser. Right now I just want to blend that in a little bit and create a little more value. I want it to be a little bit darker. So now I'm drawing a couple of rocks here in the foreground. Just going to try to create some irregular rocky shapes there. Trying to create some jagged surfaces, something that sort of looks like a rough rock, and that also needs its own reflection. And I'm using a tortillon to gently suggest that there are some smaller rocks under the surface of the water. I don't want these to be too defined. I'm just making very light suggestions of stones and rocks under that water. And I'm going to try to make this bush look a little nicer. So I'm drawing some leaves on that darker background that I created, and I'm not using the same amount of pressure when working with my pencil eraser because I want some of them to be a little bit lighter than others, and I want them to kind of overlap so that I create an illusion of more density. And I'm cleaning up some of the mountain tops here and adding some more suggestions of clouds. Here I decided to maybe add a few smaller rocks with their reflections. And it was at this point that I kind of realized that I was going to have to put something on the right side as well, because I felt like my composition needed more balance. Here I'm just trying to make the shoreline on the right a little more interesting and adding some suggestions of rocks over there as well. So here on the right in the foreground I decided to add another fallen branch. This one is going to be even closer to us, but I'm just going to use a piece of fine charcoal to draw its shape. With a few broken branches here and there. And a few, it's gonna need to have a few reflections here in the water. just a few small reflections. Just adding a little bit more value to the sky. And here, as you can see, the drawing is pretty much finished. I'm just adding a few final touches, but I've removed the tape and the drawing is already sprayed with a fixative, so all of that charcoal is not going anywhere. I'm going to put a small signature here in the bottom right corner. So that was the drawing. I hope you liked it. I want to take this opportunity to invite you to subscribe to my channel and to check out my other videos. I'm going to put some links here in the end screen where you can check out some of my other landscape drawings. If you like this one, those will be interesting to you as well, so you might want to check them out. Give me a like, comment, subscribe, and click the notification icon. That'll be all for this video. Thank you for watching.